The cage door groaned open, and the crowd's laughter rolled over me like heat from a dying star. "Look at it," someone said in trade common, the alien words clicking with contempt. "They send a child to face the vashtor." I did not answer. My hands were shaking, but I kept them loose at my sides, the way my grandfather taught me before he passed away. He used to say, "Fear is just information. Listen to it. Don't obey it." I held on to those words like a rope in the dark. Let me back up and explain how I got here, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My name is Wen Arlo, and I am 11 years old. 3 years ago, the Kesh Dominion took over our small mining colony. They did not ask permission. They simply arrived one morning with their tall ships blocking out the sun, and by nightfall, our colony belonged to them. The adults were put to work in the mines. The children were mostly ignored, which turned out to be the only lucky part of this whole story. Nobody watches a child too closely. Nobody expects a child to notice anything important. But I noticed everything. I noticed that the Kesh soldiers were afraid of one place on the colony more than any other, the arena pit, where they kept their prized war beast, the vashtor. It was 8 meters long, covered in thick black plates, with 4 eyes that never seemed to blink. The soldiers fed it through a chute so they never had to get close. They used a shock collar to control it, and even then, they whispered about it like it might break free any night and end them all. I used to sit on a broken pipe near the pit fence after my chores were done, just watching. Everyone else avoided that place. I went there because it was quiet, and because, strangely, watching the beast made me feel less alone. It was a prisoner too, just like the rest of us. One evening, I noticed something the guards had missed. When the vashtor was left alone, away from the shock collar controls, it made a soft, low sound in its throat, almost like a hum. It only did this in the dark, when it thought no one was listening. The guards never heard it, because they never stayed that long. But I did. I started coming back every night. I brought scraps of food I had saved from my own meals, small pieces of protein paste that I was not supposed to give away. At first, I only slid them through a gap in the fence and ran. The vashtor would sniff the food, then eat it slowly, watching me with those 4 unblinking eyes. After a few weeks, it stopped watching me like I might be a threat. It started watching me like it was waiting for me. I found an old bioresonance emitter in the wreckage of a crashed survey drone near the mining fields. Most of its parts were broken, but the sound emitter still worked. I spent nights taking it apart and putting it back together, trying to understand what it could do. Eventually, I figured out how to make it produce a low, steady hum, almost exactly like the sound the vashtor made when it felt calm. I started playing that hum near the fence every night. At first, the vashtor tilted its head, confused, but over time, it began to relax whenever it heard the sound. It would lower its massive head to the ground and let out a long breath, the same way a tired animal does when it finally feels safe. I realized something the Kesh soldiers never understood. They believed the vashtor was simply a weapon, a mindless beast that only understood pain and punishment. But it was not mindless. It was intelligent, and it was lonely, and it had been taught, its whole life, that the only language worth listening to was fear. Nobody had ever tried speaking to it in a different language. For 4 months, I visited it almost every night. I never told anyone, not even my mother, because I knew she would worry, and because some secrets are safer kept small. I gave it food. I played the hum. I sat near the fence and talked to it quietly, telling it about my day, about the stars, about anything at all. It never understood my words, I am sure of that. But I think it understood my voice. Voices carry more than words sometimes. Then, one terrible morning, everything changed. The Kesh Dominion held something called an Arena Day, a cruel kind of festival where they showed off the strength of their beasts and their soldiers to visiting nobles from other worlds. This year, they decided to add something new to the show, something meant to prove a point about how weak humans were compared to the mighty Kesh Empire. They chose a human to face the vashtor in the arena, not a soldier, not an adult. They chose a child, because a child losing would prove their point even louder. They chose me. I do not know exactly why they picked me. Maybe someone had seen me near the fence and thought it would make an interesting joke, sending the Beast Boy in to face the very creature he had been sneaking around. Maybe it truly was random. Either way, 3 days before Arena Day, 2 Kesh soldiers came to our small home and told my mother that I had been selected for the event. She begged them to choose someone else. They laughed and told her it was a great honor. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake, thinking about the arena, about the crowd, about the vashtor's 4 unblinking eyes staring down at me from across a stone pit. I thought about running away. I thought about hiding. But in the end, I thought about something my grandfather used to say. You cannot always choose the fight you're given, but you can choose how you walk into it. I decided I would not walk into that arena as a frightened child waiting to be eaten. I would walk in as someone who understood something the Kesh Dominion never bothered to learn. On the morning of Arena Day, the whole colony gathered around the pit, along with dozens of Kesh nobles who had traveled from other worlds just to watch. I remember the sound of their voices, layered on top of each other, some curious, some amused, most simply waiting for the show to begin. My mother stood at the very front of the crowd, her hands pressed against her mouth, unable to look away. I wore the bioresonance emitter strapped to my wrist, hidden beneath a loose sleeve. Nobody checked it. Why would they check a child for weapons when the child himself was supposed to be the entertainment? The cage door groaned open, and the laughter rolled over me. Look at it, someone said. They send a child to face the vashtor. I stepped into the sand. The pit was wide and open, with stone walls too high to climb, built specifically so nothing inside could ever escape. Above me, on all sides, the crowd leaned forward, eager for the show to begin. The vashtor unfolded itself from the far end of the pit, rising to its full height. In the daylight, without the calm of night around it, it looked exactly like the monster everyone believed it to be. Its plated skin caught the sunlight in sharp, dark gleams. Its 4 eyes fixed directly on me, and for one terrible moment, I wondered if all those months of quiet visits meant nothing at all. If it would not recognize me here, in this different place, surrounded by noise and fear. The crowd began chanting, eager for it to charge. My hands were shaking, but I kept them loose at my sides. Fear is just information. Listen to it, don't obey it. I raised my wrist and triggered the emitter. The pulse was not loud. It was barely noticeable to anyone standing far away. But it was the exact frequency I had played every night for 4 months. The sound that meant safety. The sound that meant nobody here is going to hurt you. The vashtor stopped. Its whole body went still, muscles that had been tense to charge suddenly relaxing. Its great head turned toward me, eyes widening slightly, as if it were listening very carefully to something only it could hear. Slowly, impossibly, it lowered itself down onto the sand, right there in front of the entire crowd, just as it used to do at night, alone, when it thought no one was watching. The chanting stopped. A heavy silence fell over the arena, so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and reached out my hand. I rested my palm flat against the side of its snout. It did not pull away. It leaned into my touch, the way it always did at night, and let out a long, low breath. I looked up at the crowd. Somewhere among the nobles, I could see the one who had first laughed the loudest, his mouth now hanging open in stunned silence. "He's only a child," I said, loud enough for my voice to carry across the pit, repeating their own words back to them. "You're right. I don't have your strength. I don't have your weapons." I kept my hand steady on the vashtor's snout, feeling its slow, calm breathing beneath my palm. "But you spent years teaching this creature that fear was the only thing worth understanding. I spent 4 months teaching it something different." Nobody in the crowd moved. Even the guards near the pit's edge stood frozen, unsure of what to do with a scene that broke every rule they had ever been taught about how their world worked. The vashtor rose slowly beside me, and for the first time in the history of the Dominion's arenas, one of their most feared creatures turned to face the crowd that had bred it for violence, and let out a low sound that was not a threat, but a warning. It was protecting me now, the same way I had once quietly protected it, one small kindness at a time. I do not think anyone was laughing anymore. I turned and walked out of that arena with my hand still resting against the vashtor's side, and it walked beside me, calm and steady, like it had chosen exactly where it belonged. Behind me, I could hear whispers spreading through the crowd, confused, uncertain. Some even afraid, though not of the beast anymore. They were afraid of what they did not understand. Later that night, my mother held me so tightly I could barely breathe, crying and laughing at the same time, unable to decide which feeling was stronger. The Kesh soldiers came to question me, demanding to know how I had done what I did, what secret weapon I had used against their prized creature. I only showed them the small, broken emitter on my wrist, and told them the truth. I had simply listened, and then I had spoken back in the only language the vashtor had ever truly understood. They did not know what to do with that answer. It did not fit their idea of strength. News of what happened in that arena spread quickly, first through our colony, then beyond it, carried by traders and travelers who could not stop talking about the human child who tamed the Dominion's deadliest beast without a single weapon. I do not know if it changed anything for our colony in any large way. The Kesh still ruled over us. The mines still needed workers. Life did not transform overnight, simply because of one strange afternoon in an arena. But something small did shift. The guards near the pit began speaking a little more quietly. A few nobles who had watched that day started asking questions about how their creatures were treated, questions nobody had ever bothered asking before. And every night, when the colony grew quiet and the stars came out above the mining fields, I still visited the vashtor, though now I no longer needed to hide. I would sit beside it in the dark, resting my hand against its warm side, listening to its slow, steady breathing, and I would think about what my grandfather used to tell me. Strength is not always about being the biggest or the loudest, he said once, a long time ago, back when the world still made simple sense to me. Sometimes strength is just patience. Sometimes it is choosing to understand something before deciding to fear it. I did not fully understand what he meant back then, but sitting there under the stars, beside a creature the whole Dominion had once called a monster, I finally understood completely. We were never truly small. We had simply been listening, all along, for the right moment to speak.